Welcome to Rockstar Doctor Life. I'm Alyssa Longo, and each episode, my guests and I will bring you fresh, fun ways to rock your life as a health professional and create a business that aligns with who you are and the life you want to live. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Rockstar Doctor Life. I am joined by another Rockstar Doctor, and I'm looking forward to getting to know her a little bit more in this show and hearing some day-to-day inspiration and what keeps her rocking it in her practice. Welcome to the show, Dr. Jennifer Anacker.
Thanks for having me.
I'd love for you to start, we start every show, with how can people best get a great snapshot of who is Dr. Jennifer? Like, what are you doing? Where do you practice? What's your personal life like? If I were to say, who are you? What's your quick summary for you right now?
Sure. I practice in Boise, Idaho, and I have two locations. I have an associate. In my practice, it's a heavy focus on preconception, pregnant moms, kiddos, and families. That's definitely a huge part of our practice, and yet we still see the spectrum of, day-old babies into the elderly. And, I live here in Boise. Actually, yesterday was my 18th anniversary of walking across the stage at Palmer and Davenport. So kind of fun to reflect back and look and see, like you're asking, like, who am I? And it yesterday got me in reflection to think about, where am I at as far as what's gone on in the last 18 years. I moved here knowing no one, went to a place in the United States that I had never been. And, basically in my mind, I'm living the dream.
So we graduated probably the same year, because I'm going to be celebrating 18 years in practice this year as well.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's just reflect right back there. What took you to Boise, Idaho then when you graduated from Palmer?
Yeah, I grew up in rural Iowa, Northwest Iowa, and I think true to maybe a lot of rural areas, basically German settlers came there in the 1880s and never left. And so you grow up in a town where, while there was a lot of great things about growing up in a small town, there was also I don't like this or that, I don't like what's going on in this area, and well, why don't you move? I could never move. So I really felt like that instilled in me to say, hey, let's see what else is, available, or a place where I would want to practice. And, true to how we think about in chiropractic, it's a lifestyle. So yes, I want to have a great practice, but I also want to be able to, in Idaho, enjoy the outdoors. I look for a different part of the country, knowing that I could always move back home, but let's try something different, and had certain things that I wanted in mind, from outdoors to a middle-sized city. There's a capital and a university here. And so there's always this livelihood. And I think that's really the livelihood of who we are as chiropractors. And I wanted that vibrancy, yes, in my practice, but also in the place that I lived. And Idaho fit the bill. And so I was an associate for my first year. And I said, hey, if I like it, I'll stay. And sure enough, here I am 18 years later.
So clearly you're okay with adventure.
Yeah, I literally just packed my car, and only what fit in the car is what came, including, I think I had even 2 portable adjusting tables in the car. So, yeah.
Well, 2 things I love about that. One is that you certainly got clear on, how are you going to create your own Rockstar Doctor life? What does it mean to you? What do you want? And then you looked on the map and said, this is where I'm going to go and give it a shot. So awesome. Yeah. I love that story. But again, like a lot of docs listening might be hearing your story and thinking, wow, how did she do that? There may be something new they need to pursue, a new technique, a new marketing strategy, a new, maybe relocating, a new relationship, and yet they're held back by some kind of fear. Sure. So for you, being adventurous and saying, I'm going to just go and give this a shot, what piece of advice can you give to doctors about how you embrace that sense of uncertainty and fear?
I think every personality goes through their own, kind of what they need to do beforehand. There's always conversations about what are your values, or what are you looking for, or what are your needs, wants, likes lists. There might be some kind of calculation that you do mentally to say, yeah, this is what I want to do. But I think it's true to anything. There comes a point where you can only analyze it so much, and then you just have to do it. Knowing that, yeah, I might have a plan B in my head. I said, hey, if it doesn't work, I can go back to the Midwest. Yeah. But, let's give me, and I gave myself, a year to 2 year time period. And you just have to, you can only calculate for so long, and then you just have to try it. And then watch what unfolds, because you just never know how it's going to all unfold. But sometimes, even if sometimes you just have to be in the motion of change in order to allow the universe, God, to then bring in that change that you've been asking for. But if you're not in motion of it, then that's also, you're stuck. So sometimes you just got to give life a go.
Yeah, I think I agree with you 100%. I mean, something we often talk about with my clients is like learning by doing, right? You can't stay stuck. And I do think that fearlessness and that sense of adventure is, for some people, it's innate, that's their personality type. But I definitely think that it can be learned. And the more you just jump and fall and refine resilience or find a new path, it just builds your character and helps you make other choices down the road as well. So I'm with you 100%. We learn by doing. We can't overthink everything.
Yeah. And I think too, even our challenges became our successes. It's like, what's next? Or, okay, that door quickly closed. Let's, instead of right, let's look left. What's over here? And so just because you go down a path, even if it's not what you thought it was going to be, it doesn't mean that it's still not the continuation of the path to where you're supposed to be.
Right. Yes. I mean, I think that the only time we fail is when we quit. And we talk about something a lot, or I talk about something a lot, creating an idea and then acting on it, producing it. We call it the CPR cycle. And then, actually taking a step back and reflecting, what was working, what didn't work. And then you've got all that data then about what worked or what didn't work, whatever it is. If it's a new sport you're trying, a new thing in your practice, something in your relationships with your kids, whatever it is. But you have to have that idea, you have to act on it. And then you have to take a step back and say, is this working for me or not? Is it monetized? Is it, am I making the money I thought? Is it effective? Like, if you're not taking a step back and looking, then you're not learning from it. So I think that's awesome. So tell us then how you went from, associate, then you opened your own practice, and now you have two practices. So take us through that little story there.
Yeah. So I had the associateship was here in Boise, and, learned a lot, and true to some associate positions, there was just a beginning and an end. Had to quickly scramble to figure out what that next chapter is. I think we all had those, moments where we're trying to, when you're first in practice, you're throwing a ton of stuff up on the wall, hoping something sticks, figuring out who you are, how to run this practice life. And so, I transitioned and I rented some space in another office, and then that led to having my own space. And then after a couple of years, I have, what you would probably call like the larger practice and a satellite practice. And then 2 years later, I established a larger, by numbers and by volume practice, but I still kept the satellite practice. And that's something that's definitely has worked for me. I don't know that it would work for every personality, honestly. But I've been able to create tools and rhythms and rituals and, procedures that allow me to do it with more ease probably than what people think. Mm-hmm. But it does take some creativity, and the two practices that I have, honestly, one's in downtown Boise and one's in the suburb. Even though I see the same demographics just based on who lives in each area, it's a lot of fun, because it's also, like going to two different, it is two different physical practices, but the type of people that come in, there's larger families out in more in the suburban area, and then downtown there's maybe 1 to 2 kids, and a lot of them are business people, so it's just, it's fun for me. It's fun for my personality. It keeps it lively and exciting, and it works.
You've been able to manage your time effectively.
Yeah. I think, I always think about the age of the business or the practice being much like, and obviously you have a child that's probably about this age, but like the age of a child, that when when your practice is early on, it takes a lot of energy and effort to get everything up and going. And then, once you get more, an older practice, an older child, you learn a lot. And so things can run with a little bit better rhythm. But, it's been a process where I grew up in a rural agriculture area, and true to my family, they're hardworking people, and they could work sun up to sundown. And so I had that in me. But then there comes a point in time where you look and you go, oh my God, like I've got to do better use of my time. I need to go on vacation. More is not always better when you're talking about like hours of working, that, over time you have to learn how to have that downtime.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what does that look like for Dr. Jennifer? What are some of the things you love to do when you're not in practice?
Yeah. You know, it was interesting this past year when I hired the associate, it freed up, we worked together a lot of the shifts, but it freed up a couple of shifts where I don't work. And, you know, I remember the first Tuesday afternoon I had off, calling my business coach and being like, what do people do on Tuesday afternoons? And why is everybody driving around? Don't they have some place to be? But that, you know, I will answer that question, but I just have to point out it was so fascinating. I know this from taking vacations, but the more time that I was able to take off these 2 afternoons, the busier the practice got. And so that allowed me, you know, to also have more energy because I took better care of myself. It's not that I wasn't taking great care. We can all level up. And so, you know, I enjoy like those afternoons off. I enjoy, you know, going to spinning class, going on a walk. You know, we can hike in our foothills. We, you know, my partner Rob and I, we go camping and, you know, outdoors, and I play volleyball. I mean, there's just a lot of things that you want to fuel yourself personally that you have to step out and say, oh my gosh, when I'm on, but when I'm off, I got to be off. Mm-hmm. I'm better for it.
Yeah, I think it's something that, I mean, listeners, you've heard me say this over and over again. I mean, it's one of my biggest values with working with people is like, if you can't take time out, you can't be focused when you're in. I mean, the fastest way to burn out and overwhelm is not giving yourself physical health. And we know this as health professionals, but sometimes we forget it, right? We forget how vital it is to be taking care of our physical and emotional, spiritual well-being.
And it's interesting too, like sometimes I will say when things are, I don't know, spiraling or just, you know, there's a heavier load or you feel overwhelmed, you know, times when my psyche says, okay, we're going to push through this and you're going to work harder to get to the other end. And, you know, only through a business coach, the epiphany of, oh, instead of that, I need to go on vacation.
I just said this to someone the other day. I said, they were like, I should be working. I'm like, okay, well, people know. So I said, fuck work. I said, you know what? If you actually take a holiday, your business will flow differently afterwards. Because you know, it's proven over and over again. Some of the most productive people in this planet take a regular time off, and it might just be an afternoon every other day, or it might be a weekend away once. It doesn't have to be anything monumental, especially docs, if you're just starting out or you're not at a place with your practice volume where you feel like you can afford it. But I guarantee making those windows of time out will fuel your practice like nothing else.
Yeah. Because it's always amazing, right? You're like, oh my God, I'm taking a week off when all is not well in your mind. And then, you know, you come back and you're like, oh my God, I'm relaxed. I'm showing up. I'm having the best week at all. Whatever you were worried about, you know, it's how life goes. Sometimes your worry isn't put in the best places. You're like, oh my God, it just figured itself out. I just needed to step away from it.
Yeah. And so, you know, you being in practice now for this many years, I mean, obviously that's something that you learned gradually. And in ways that I love how you talked about the seasons of practice life, that when you're in the early couple of years, you're just building and growing, you know, it's more of a sacrifice than it is 18 years later. What are some of the things that you've observed consistently help your practice grow and help it get to the point now where you can sit back a little bit and just enjoy the fruits of your labor?
Yeah. I think, you know, you hear it talked about in different levels for different aspects, but is the two things that come to mind. Number one is creating rhythms and rituals. And so that might be, you know, how you run your procedures, how you have your office meetings, when you have them. Are you meeting, you know, with your office manager? You know, I meet with my office manager once a week. I meet with my associate, you know, for a 30-minute time block and then a couple of 10 minutes where we can during the week. You know, I think having that, you know, ability to both be in it and have a good pace, but also to be able to step back. And maybe it's something like, okay, the beginning of the year, what are we going to do for internal marketing? Yes, this can evolve and change, but the more that you have, you know, written down what already works for you and you don't, you know, go through the first quarter and go, oh my gosh, I should have done something. My business is, you know, numbers are going down, let's say. Well, if you have everything in place, you'll be able to know how your business works and what supports it, you know, what systems support it. And then I think the other thing that comes to mind is building those consistent relationships that, you know, they started from when I first was in practice, but now and for me, whether it's the relationships with midwives or doulas or the birthing community, that's a huge part of my practice, that those relationships also have evolved into rhythms and rituals that I have for maybe an external event for them, or who's getting referred into my office, or touching base with them, or going out for lunch, that, having that consistency so I don't feel like, oh, if things go down a bit, I don't have to be overwhelmed and do 5 million things to bring it back up. I understand the rhythm of the practice.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's consistency, right? It's doing those things consistently over time and building and nurturing those relationships like you nurture every other relationship in your life.
Yeah.
You mentioned, working with a business coach. How valuable do you think having business coaches or mentors have been in your career?
I've had different coaches over a lifetime of, 18 years feels like a lifetime sometimes, but of practice that sometimes like early on, I think I've evolved with who my needs were. It was very important for me. When you first start out, it's a lot of procedures, you know what you know, but you don't even realize what you don't know until you're like, oh my gosh, what am I, you really just want somebody sometimes to just tell me what to do. Tell me what I should do for a recommendation. Tell me how I interact with the patient. Tell me, just tell me what to do, and then you go from that. And then I think you start to realize that, okay, now I have a sense of what worked and what didn't work. And then you start to evolve as a person. And so, then as I continue to go along, yes, it's still about practice. But now as I coach with a woman, Dr. Linda Silva, and for me now, it's not that it's not about practice, but it becomes a lot about who am I and what do I need in my personal life. And sometimes I need even within Lynn coaching or a particular coach, I might sometimes need heavy on the business, a little lighter on the personal, sometimes heavier on the personal, a little lighter on the business, because we all know that who we are is who shows up. And so if I'm not doing a great job taking care of myself, that's a direct reflection of what the practice looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of times people's personal lives will be reflected in your practice. If you're distracted, and actually even more, I mean, sometimes obviously we can't plan the distractions that show up in our life. That's just the way life happens sometimes. But if you know in advance, look, coming into spring, I've got birthdays and travel plans and kids have soccer starting, then you know how to tailor your expectations in your practice life as well. So your personal and professional life merge consistently.
And I think sometimes too, I've heard this talked about from the stage, the chiropractic stage, is that, when the highs are highs and the lows are lows and you're like, oh my gosh, things are great. Oh my gosh, this is terrible. That over time you get less reactive towards those things. And even something like a little tip could be that my coach taught me was like looking at a 13-week average of your practice. And so you look at that and you go, no, this is a reflection of my practice is still healthy. I might have just had a day or a week or, something, it's life. And so there might have been a little hitch here or there, but certainly you can look at the averages of where your practice is at. And that gives you a better reflection of where you truly are versus being reactive. Mm-hmm.
It's been really great that I've had a chance to connect with you personally at the, the LCW event, this business spa a couple of years ago, where I was speaking at that, and more recently at CalJam. What are some of the places or things that you do to stay inspired aside from those two places?
For me, I'm not as, it's not that I don't read books, but I have traveling time between the two offices. And so I don't really listen to the radio much when I'm traveling. And so it's about anything from a podcast to a program to, something that I might have seen on Facebook that somebody posted as a conversation. And so some things that I follow are anything from, I look to different, just like everybody, I look to different people for different things. I love Heather Dennison's Well Fit and Fed, and her program, The Change Cave, is really inspiring, I think, for, I like to find little tips and suggestions for myself or, things to hack or what to, little things that can help to get you to that next level. So she's got a great program there. I like to listen to Fearless Family Health, Cheryl Schmidt. She's got a great program. Then on a chiropractic end, I listen to Remarkable CEO with Stephen Franson. I know he's been on your podcast. That guy does systems and escalating bigger thinking, and I appreciate that. But I think, and maybe it's, could be on a financial level, listening to things. I think it's important to have a relationship just like you have, with your loved ones or your family members. I think it's also important to have a relationship with your finances and be in constant contact and overlooking them. And so, I like to dive into that and listen to different philosophies. And there's just a lot of great stuff. I like to have in chiropractic, I think have both the female and the male perspective. It can be very different about just the way that we do practice, whether you have a family or not and you're a female, you may look at things differently. Maybe not everybody, but you may look at things differently and what your needs are versus, a male practice. And so I like to get a little bit of everybody, or just a little bit of variety. So.
Yeah, everyone has a different perspective. And I think that's the value in learning from a lot of different people is hearing different things. And at the end of the day, getting quiet and sitting back and thinking what works for you, right? How does this person's opinion, whether it's at a conference, someone from the stage or on a podcast or a book, learning, and then taking some quiet time to think, okay, what makes sense for me, and make sure that you check in with yourself, and whatever procedure or tip or health hack that you're going to implement, it actually does fit with you. Because I have to say, like, the fastest way to an unhappy life is doing what someone else tells you to do, or trying to be someone else, right? So I'm the same. I love to learn from a lot of different people, but at the end of the day, it has to say, how does this work for my lifestyle and my family life? So asking myself that question. So you're obviously really inspired, by chiropractic, by healthy habits. What keeps you inspired to show up every day in your practice and rock it as a chiropractor?
I think even going back, again, I was doing some reflecting yesterday in the 18 years, yes, chiropractic is a philosophy, art, and science. But the biggest piece of what initially I would say kept me going, and, it's just starting out, like there's just some interesting days for me, was being sound in the philosophy of chiropractic. I think, understanding and being rooted in that, and, yes, for what but when you get to direct people and watch their bodies heal, I think just watching, never losing sight of, you start to see numbers of people, but never lose sight of the one person in front of you, the changes that you can make in their lives. It's just, sometimes you didn't even know they were, listening as well as they were listening, and they recite back to you something a few weeks later, like, oh, I switched, or I changed this, or, I understand how my body's healing. I think just to be present with people, and I think to always be learning and always asking questions, and, yes, you need to take pauses times to reflect and rest, but never getting stagnant. And so whether it's, being engaged, listen to a podcast, attend a seminar, I think also, finding your tribe of people. Thinking back yesterday as well, thinking about, okay, I have just been asked to join a women's Royal Knights of the Round Table, which is a group of about 20 women. So those are the people that are ahead of me, staying in contact. I have 2 really good girlfriends that we get on the phone once a month to stay present and accountable. And then I also look at, I'll say who's behind me, whether it's my associate or, students or whoever that is. Like, I think it's also important to get excited. Like, the other day I was in conversation with somebody who's a student at chiropractic school, and it's like, oh my gosh, their excitement, as excited as I was to have a conversation with them about what I'm doing in practice, the questions that they ask me, like, that also refuels you. And so there's that constant, give and receive going on, but staying engaged, staying motivated, having good rhythms and rituals, and honoring where you're at. Not every day is a perfect day either. So.
Yeah. I like what you said about don't get stagnant. I often think that when we get bored, that's what leads to bad behavior. If you get bored in your practice, you don't necessarily, produce the same way. If you're bored in your relationships, that can lead to dysfunctional habits. You get bored with your life in general, then people can be really self-destructive. And stay engaged, keep learning, keep challenging yourself, keep trying new things. And to me, that's, if you're not growing, you're dying, right? So I'd rather be growing all the time. Thank you so much for your time today. If there was one thing you wished all chiropractors know, one last piece of advice you had for everyone, what would that be?
One thing I wish that all chiropractors, that's a great question. I feel like I could repeat some of the things that I've answered before, but I think, never forgetting the fact, I think most people feel like they were called to be chiropractors, staying true to yourself and what your needs are, and, know that you were given this gift to serve others, and the world needs us. The world needs us now. I want to say more than ever. There's just some wild things going on, and people need to be able to trust their body to heal and to be given, lifestyle suggestions, etc. And I think the message that we have is just so powerful. And even though, yes, this is what we do all day, and you could forget how powerful it is, really take some time to, think about the power of chiropractic and the power of the gift that you were given, and look to help others, and, you know, show up every day as the best version of yourself.
I think there's a lot of serendipity in what you just said, because I'm just back from traveling with my kids, and my youngest son had some challenges with, he did with some congestion at times, and certainly the descent of the plane, he was uncomfortable, he got a headache. And so of course his first thing is, Mom, will you adjust me? I was trying to adjust him in the plane seat there, but as soon as we get off the plane and afterwards, the whole time we were away, I kept checking him before we traveled. And I just was so grateful that we have the power and the abilities and the skills that we do as chiropractors to actually change someone's physiology. Whatever kind of style of practice you have, we know that if if there's issues with sinus congestion, it can come from the cervical spine. So, adjusting him and just having that chance to do something physically to help him, I mean, that's a powerful place for all of us to remind ourselves that, we have that ability to help people tremendously by changing their physiology with every adjustment. So I'm certainly grateful for it. And I'm just as fired as you up, 18 years later, I'm more excited to be a chiropractor now than I was when I first graduated, because I also keep seeing all the changes in people's health and well-being that happen with adjustments in chiropractic care. So thank you for sharing all that today. Thanks for joining me on the show. And we'll look forward to connecting again in one of these live events, hopefully.
Awesome. Have a great day.
You too. I hope you enjoyed today's show. Find out more about today's guests and everything else that we talked about in the show notes. You can also find all this content and so much more, including videos, blog posts, and how you can work with me on the Rockstar Doctor Life website. If you haven't yet reviewed the show, we'd love it if you headed on over to iTunes, subscribe, and leave us a review about what your thoughts are about future episodes for the show and what you like best. Feel free to connect with me on Instagram at Melissa Longo DC, and of course on Facebook. Thanks again for listening. We'll see you next time.